Hey, everybody. Adam here. Just want to say thanks directly to the people that are monthly supporting this podcast financially. Taylor McCaleb and Carl Ziegler Jr. Thank you guys so much for your support. You guys, you can go to the podcast page and you'll find a link there to support us monthly if you are so inclined. Also, Becca and I have been brainstorming lately about another layer of content to the podcast, a whole other feed. We continue our normal episodes as usual, but we really want to turn Becca loose as the gifted researcher she is to go even deeper on poison content, true crime, historical research, all that fun stuff. Maybe it's subscriptions on Spotify, maybe it's a Patreon, we're not sure. Just let us know. Either comment on the podcast page, you could do that on Spotify, or send us a DM on socials. We've got links in the show notes to follow the socials, especially the podcast Instagram, Poisoners_Almanac. Becca is running that account herself and posting deeper level content, more granular stuff. And also want to say thanks for all the 5-star reviews you guys are leaving on Spotify in particular. That is a huge help to the podcast. It pushes it further into the algorithm to reach people like yourself who enjoy the podcast. So thank you for doing that. And if you don't do any of that stuff, just know that your listenership is more than enough for us. So thank you for listening. Welcome back to the Poisoner's Almanac. I'm Adam.
I'm Rebecca.
And today, my dear, is the thrilling conclusion of the epic saga.
It is. And we're doing this in the morning right now.
Yes.
We don't usually do this in the morning. So if
Yes.
I'm going to do my best to sound perky. I've got some coffee here with me. So
yes, you do. And that is God's plan for your life. Yeah, so
cheers. Cilantro.
We as amateur podcasters, we're, just trying to find a good rhythm and time of day for when we record our episodes. On top of, I'm working full time. Becca's a full-time mom to our 8-year-old daughter.
Who is hyper.
Yes, she is a high attention child. And so just, getting in a groove where, we can consistently get our content together, get the podcast together, our posts for socials, all that fun stuff. We're just trying to find a rhythm for all that. And so we're recording on a weekday morning this time.
But it's Friday, so it's kind of a weekend morning.
It is Friday, I'll tell you what.
It's Friday. My eyes hurt.
So part 3 of Radium today, my dear, is that right?
This is correct.
Okay. Why don't we jump right in?
Do my best. Okay, so I think last time we ended where we talked about some of the girls in Ottawa, Illinois.
Yes.
And I know we went over more about the stories happening in New Jersey. But when we ended it last time, we talked about the non-doctor, Dr. Flynn.
Yes.
And the surprise that he is, in fact, not a medical doctor.
He was involved. He was involved with the whole hullabaloo with lead gasoline, right?
So, yeah, Dr. Flynn, not a doctor. So, just Flynn. Okay. Also, we discussed Ella Cruz and her family filing a lawsuit against Radium Dial after her death and after they have started to hear about what's happening, with radium. So, all right, we're going on to part 3. We are starting out with our girls in Ottawa, Illinois. It is 1929, and Sven Kier, the inspector from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, was giving it another go with Radium Dial after news of the New Jersey girls and the lawsuit filed by Ella Cruz's family now. Mm-hmm. He was actually undertaking a detailed federal study into radium poisoning now because he had no doubt that the disease was occupational Remember, like, they had to pull him back from his inspection because of, well, money issues, but also they were like, well, it's not phosphorus. And we thought it was phosphorus, so we can just stop reviewing this.
Right.
But he, in the few weeks that he was there inspecting, he was all like, this is actually dangerous. So he wanted to continue his investigation into it.
Mm-hmm.
So at least somebody's doing something. Yeah, he went to Radium Dial looking for information on the medical exams done by them, that they weren't telling the girls about. Like, they were doing these exams on the girls and then not telling them the results or anything.
Yeah.
So he went there to see if he can get that information himself. And they sent him, and this is going to sound familiar, they sent him some data, but it was incomplete. Like, are these guys like just meeting and just having brunch and they're like, oh, just do what I did. Just send it, but don't send it all.
The treachery.
Shocker. Still, he made a report on what he had learned, including how one worker, Peg Looney, had been found to be radioactive all the way back in 1925, and that she was still radioactive when tested again in 1928, so just a year ago, because this is 1929.
That's wild.
And when he pushed for more information, the company declined and made sure to tell him that this was not radium poisoning at all. Peg Looney knew none of this, by the way.
She didn't know the results of her own.
No one told her anything. They were just kind of watching to see what would happen with her, basically. So and other girls. She wasn't the only one who was radioactive. But
so at the end of their exam, they just go, "Okay, we got what we need. Have a good one."
Yeah, we'll just keep this one on watch,
Sure.
And they just kept on keeping on. So
yeah.
Peg had more teeth removed at this point, the sites still refusing to heal, and now she could barely walk because of the pain in her hip and the weakness from the anemia.
Yeah.
She was literally pulling her own teeth and pieces of her jaw out at one point.
Okay.
And she saw a doctor who told her to change jobs immediately, but Peg wasn't all that inclined to, it seems. By now, she was having pain in her legs, head, wrists, ankles, and ribs, and she was generally unwell. I think she just figured, like, well, I'm already sick, and this is right around the beginning of the Great Depression is about to happen too. So,
oh wow,
this is 1929.
29. Okay. Yeah. Had the stock market crashed at this point?
It does this year.
That year it did.
Yeah, it did.
Wow.
What is it? Black Tuesday or Black?
Yeah.
Something. Was it Black Tuesday? Was it a Tuesday? Yeah. Something like that. And I'll mention it too.
Tuesday.
Yeah, Tuesdays are rough. First of all, this particular Tuesday even rougher. Yeah. So she collapsed while at work one day, and Mr. Reed, who had been telling the girls, "Oh, it'll make you pretty. It'll make your cheeks rosy."
Mm.
He had her taken to a hospital where the company doctor worked.
No, okay.
And, yeah. Radium Dial knew that Sven Kuhr was on their backs with her case, as his report showed, and they really didn't want her condition getting out. So, yeah, her family was prohibited from seeing her, which they could not get away with today. And they were told she was quarantined with diphtheria. That's what they were told.
Okay.
Now, Margaret Peg Looney died on August 14th, 1929. Her family, while not allowed to visit her, were in the hospital still when she died. So they were there, but they weren't allowed to visit her. Some men from the company promptly came to collect her body so they could bury her quietly, but thankfully, one of her brothers-in-law confronted them and basically told them to back off. Like, you're not taking her anywhere.
Yikes.
They argued with him and, of course, lost. So the company asked if an autopsy could be performed. And the family agreed on the condition that their family doctor be present. However, when that doctor arrived to help with the autopsy at the time they had been told, the autopsy was already done.
Oh, yeah? Just a little auto autopsy?
Yeah, they just went ahead and changed the time without telling the doctor.
Oh, my God.
On purpose. And they had given him the wrong time, basically. So not only that, but the company doctor had taken some of her bones, specifically the girl's jawbone. Just took it away.
Well, that's theft.
Also desecration.
Yes.
I imagine. The official autopsy written by the company doctor stated that her teeth were in great condition, even though she'd been pulling them out. So she couldn't have had many left. and that everything was normal until she caught diphtheria. So her cause of death was listed as diphtheria. So, and fun fact, we actually have a vaccine for that now, even though she did not die from diphtheria.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. I think it's the Tdap or tetanus, diphtheria.
That's what the D is for.
Mhm.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. And
Yay us.
yeah, and pertussis. So
Okay.
which is whooping cough, I believe.
Whooping cough.
It's a nasty thing too.
It really is awful.
Mhm.
It's got the funniest name for the most terrible disease.
Yeah.
So
And also, like, my brain when I hear diphtheria goes to, I don't know if anybody else was obsessed with this cartoon like I was, but
Sailor Moon.
no.
Okay, sorry.
Why would Sailor Moon have diphtheria?
No. You were just talking about Sailor Moon yesterday.
Well, yeah, I could have more than one favorite obsession growing up. Yes. No. It's the dog. The dog up in Alaska. I need more coffee. Hang on. Balto. I need more coffee to remember names. Balto. I was obsessed with Balto growing up as a kid. I had the stuffies. I would watch that movie just on repeat.
Oh.
But part of it is the kids there. They were struggling with diphtheria and they needed medicine. And so that's what they were getting the racing dogs to do.
Was the disease that... Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Based on a true story. Sorry, I got a cold brew here. Okay. All right, back to Peg, though. Yeah. So the company then decided to invade the privacy some more of Peg and her family by putting a summary of the report in the local paper, attaching their own note to her obituary stating that there was no sign of radium poisoning. So
I am speechless.
Yeah.
That...
It's awful. Even further, the company had written that the family was pleased with these findings. They were not. So,
if I was her dad, I'd have taken matters into my own hands. I'm being honest.
Yeah.
I would have. It'd be a hostage situation.
Within the next year, 1930, other girls that had been working for Radium Dial, some had left at this point, were having a hard time. Even those that had left and those that were still there were having a hard time at this point. Catherine Wolfe was so ill, the company told her she needed to take 6 weeks off, as if that would help. And this is like when people were working 6 days a week, like 12 to 16 hours a day.
Oh, sure.
You know,
mm-hmm.
No paid time off.
Sure.
So
any company of any means is exploiting every single worker they have because people's terror of starving.
Yeah. So they made her take 6 weeks off, and I guarantee you they didn't pay her anything for that.
What? There's no paid time off for female workers in the 20s?
I don't think there was any paid time off for
anyone.
For anyone. I don't think so.
Right.
But the company had at first included her in their medical exams, but now they were refusing to even let her be seen by their doctors. It was like they were just kind of ignoring her situation. They're like, you know what? Let's just not. So she even went up and asked if she could be seen by the doctor, and they were like, no. So she was now suffering from exhaustion, pain, and walking with a limp at 27.
Mm-hmm.
Her doctor thought she might be suffering from rheumatism, which is what they called basically anything that hurt. Either rheumatism or you're hysterical, your uterus is moving around too much. Yeah, tuberculosis. I mean, at this point, like, tuberculosis was...
She might have gotten
was catchy.
I mean, who knows?
I mean, you know.
It was okay. It was very catchy at the time.
It had some pretty obvious symptoms for the most part. Mm-hmm. Tuberculosis did. More so than, say, this other stuff that they're just guessing about.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the company changed her duties at the firm after some of the girls noticed how poorly she was doing. They just kind of moved her away so she would stop, so people would stop talking about it. So,
yeah.
Marie Becker, now Marie Rossiter, as she had married, had lost 2 babies at this point and was pregnant with a 3rd.
Oh, man.
So this seems to be happening quite a bit too. Charlotte Nevins, now Purcell, as she had also married, was able to have a child, but the child was born 2 months early and was only like 2.5 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
So he had to be on an incubator for like 6 weeks, but he luckily survived.
Did he really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh. I mean, this is like the dark ages of NICU care.
Yeah. Well, even today, like, at least I know here in the States, they've talked about how terrible the mortality rate is for especially like moms postpartum.
Oh yeah,
So,
of course.
especially in the South. So, yay!
Right. It was extremely dangerous to have a child.
And especially for Black women.
Oh,
So,
of course. Everything's going to get worse for any minority, for sure.
It's terrible here. So, we really need to do something about that. So, let's see. Inez Corcoran, now Inez Vallet, I'm going to say Vallet, was only 23.
Valo.
Yeah, she got married too, so. She was only 23 and having bad headaches and hip pains and stiffness in her hips. She was unable to work by now and had lost 20 pounds. Her mouth had become infected and she was losing teeth. She literally had to hold a bandage to her jaw constantly because of the drainage.
Ugh.
It was awful. Yeah.
That's terrible.
Peg Looney's parents had tried bringing suit against Radium Dial, believing their daughter's death certificate was an error. I mean, yeah. But nothing came of it. None of the lawyers around there knew much about radium, and no one had much interest in helping them.
And they don't have any contact with Ray Berry.
No, this is a different area. Right. They don't even know who that is.
This is Ottawa, Illinois.
Not to mention, yeah. And so, they where they're at, and not to mention they don't have much money anyway. So like a lot of people aren't going to take up their case if they can't pay them.
And because there's not a ton of legal precedent for the compensation of things like this, a lawyer can't go into this saying, well, this just, this will be a ton of work and will take up several years of my professional life, but it will be extremely lucrative financially.
Yeah. Well, we
can't say that.
We will meet another champion here in a moment.
Wonderful.
So, okay. Mary Vicini. I know. Princess Bride.
There's not a lot of money in revenge.
Now,
so I work for Vicini to pay the bills.
She got married, so now she's married Tonielli.
No.
Tough.
She's not Vicini anymore?
No. Well, this will lead to less interruptions, I'm sure. So
delete this episode. She
left Radium Dial when she started feeling sick, believing she had sciatica. She was having pain there, and she ended up finding a lump on her back and was diagnosed with a sarcoma of the spine. She died February 22nd, 1930 at 21 years old.
Bro.
So the sarcomas are becoming a thing, more and more. Now, back in New Jersey, a few of the doctors that had been working with the girls, including Dr. Martland, had some hope that the girls might see some of the progression of symptoms cease. He hypothesized that the mesothorium in the paint was the most aggressive and had a much smaller half-life. So it's an isotope of radium with a half-life of 6.7 years instead of 1,600 years.
That is a drastic difference. Wow.
So its decay would give the girls some relief, though they would remain in the condition they were currently in. This was just his hypothesis. He doesn't,
Who was this again?
Dr. Martland.
Martland?
He's been helping with the girls in New Jersey.
I remember. Okay. I'm with you.
There was no undoing the damage done, but perhaps the damage could stop progressing so quickly. Most of the girls used the money from their settlements in New Jersey to help their parents pay medical bills and get away to find a little peace here and there. Now, just as their lawyer, Raymond Berry, had suspected, however, it wasn't long before the U.S. Radium Corporation started trying to cheat their way out of paying what they had agreed upon. Remember, in the last episode, they got a decent settlement, but they were like, oh, but we're going to institute this condition where we have 3 doctors, at least one of our choosing.
Yeah, one of our choosing, one of your choosing, and one of both of our choosing.
Yeah. So now, the 3 doctors hired into the committee to treat and examine the girls were James Ewing, a so-called radium specialist who was not a fan of Dr. Martland, by the way. So, yeah.
Is it Ewing?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's Ewing.
But I like Ewing.
It's more fun.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that. Let's do it.
Dr. Lloyd Craver, who was mutually appointed. Ewing was the one the company had appointed. So
okay,
So I'm gonna call him whatever I want to call. I'm just kidding. I mean, the corporations do whatever they want to do. So, and a Dr. Edward Crumbar appointed to the girls' side. Now, doctors Ewing and Craver thought that they would be able to clear the Radium Corporation with a breath test in the fall of 1928 for some reason, even though they could easily see the condition the girls were in. Now, at this point, Grace's range of motion, Grace Fryer, she was severely limited throughout, and what was left of her jaw could be seen just looking inside her mouth. It was awful.
It's just so disfiguring to have that happen.
Yeah. And imagine the pain these girls are suffering too.
Yeah. And the social fallout. Like you don't want to go out in public.
Now, Catherine was barely able to walk with a cane. Edna's legs had fixed themselves irreversibly so that they stayed cross.
Oh my God.
And Quinta McDonald had to remain in these like plaster casts as her bones were basically falling apart. Albina Maja Larice was unable to move much because her hips had lost all range of motion and were just locked into place. Mm-hmm. These doctors were very invasive during these exams, which for some reason included a vaginal exam, except for a few of the girls who literally could not endure such an exam because their legs were locked up. So,
oh my gosh.
Like, I'm sorry, no.
And just a quick reminder, like I'm a physical therapist, Becca's a registered nurse. Like we very much sympathize with all of the symptoms and fallout of being poisoned by radium. Like I'm picturing, I've seen patients in these kinds of conditions, but not because of poisoning.
Right.
So it's just so sad to hear what state they ended up in.
Yeah. And I imagine the lack of dignity and control they have here too. They're seeing these brand new doctors who are very invasive with these exams.
Oh, of course.
I'm sure they were very uncomfortable with all of this, but after the breath tests that doctors Ewing and Craver had been so sure of, they were apparently shocked. The results were positive for radioactivity, but now these two believed that the girls must be cheating the test somehow. Seriously?
I love it.
They literally made them endure the exams again to be sure.
The entire, not just the breath test?
The second exam was done in a hotel, and while Dr. Craver was there, the other two doctors on the list were not. Instead, a Dr. Schlunt, a friend of the corporation's vice president, and the vice president himself were there. Oh, the vice president also assisted. Because why not?
Because why not? He's a vice president. It'll be fine.
There was also a Dr. Falia, whom the girls did not know. But once Barry heard about this, he immediately called out the Radium Corporation's breach of settlement agreement. Interestingly, though, this bit of trickery did not do them much good, as the Dr. Falia that had been there declared that they were all indeed radioactive.
Okay.
Yeah.
So even though they were trying to clear the company, they could not.
Yeah. But then, the first time they tried it, they're like, oh, well, they must be cheating it somehow. They're lying. They're so lying. And it's like, oh my God. Why?
It's amazing.
Now, Raymond Barry was continuing his fight for other dial painters, including one named May Coverly Canfield. She was the one who had trained Catherine Schaub when she was a new employee. So she'd been there a while. She was now paralyzed on her right side, and all of her teeth were gone. Oh my gosh. During this fight, Barry was able to have the judge declare that Frederick Flynn not be able to perform the exam for May, and only an actual physician could, because hello.
That's my favorite thing.
It should be pretty obvious.
So
yeah. Frederick Flynn, the not doctor, was now proposing that the girls' diet was the reason behind their inability to keep radium out of their bones.
Yeah, listen, you guys got to cut back on the sweets.
Their diet, okay.
Yes.
I just wish this guy would shut up.
Mm-hmm.
So
may he die of radium poisoning.
Oh my God. I mean, who knows? So now he was content to admit that they had been poisoned with radium, but it was somehow their fault. Radium took another life November of 1928 when Dr. Sabin von Sochaki died.
Unbelievable.
Of the radium in his body.
Yeah.
A conference was held in December of that year to discuss so like literally the next month, to discuss radium with such attendees as Catherine Wiley, the Consumer League
Yes.
chick.
Executive, what was she? Executive director?
Assistant or something.
Yeah.
But a really good ally to these girls. Dr. Humphreys, who had been their like primary doctor before, they started seeing these other doctors. So he'd been around for a while. Dr. Martland, who came up with the breath tests, to test for their
Clever.
Yeah, and he's also the medical examiner of the area. The non-Dr. Flynn was there, and a few other actual doctors, and some of the Radium Company executives, and some from Radium Dial who decided not to even talk. They were just there to listen. This was simply to debate the subject of radium as a toxin and provide some possible suggestions. Literally the only purpose of this meeting. No one...
I suggest you don't use it.
Yeah. No one from the company wanted to call radium toxic at all. And basically they kept any proposals from going forward by saying this was not an endemic problem since it was isolated, even though it really wasn't. So honestly, it just felt like a big waste of time. Now, in 1930, Catherine Schaub was relying on the annual pension that she was receiving from the settlement, as the rest of the money had gone towards, her health problems and such.
Yeah.
And she ended up taking a tumble and breaking her leg. These girls' bones are much more fragile because of the radium.
Yeah.
She was given worse news, however, when they discovered a sarcoma on her knee. She was admitted to the hospital and treated with x-rays, which seemed to help the swelling some, but she would still need a brace for her leg. Her mental health had already been declining, but now hit rock bottom, pretty much. And she started refusing treatments from the corporation-assigned and mutually assigned doctors, Ewing and Craver. And they were angry about not just her refusal, but the other girls as well, who were just tired of their BS, which at this point,
Yeah, they can tell they're not trying to help them.
Right. Now, we are now fresh into the Great Depression, so that's fun. Black Tuesday, as I mentioned earlier, was October 29th, 1929.
Perfect time for critically ill people to be broke with no hope of earning capacity. Love it.
So, but the U.S. Radium Corporation was doing just fine financially.
What do you know?
Well, Dr. Martland had tried having hope for the girls, thinking that the disease would not progress quickly any longer. He was, that hypothesis he had about the mesothorium. They were indeed getting worse as they went on to develop sarcomas in various places of their bodies. So he would go on to report that in the cases autopsied recently, the mesothorium has disappeared while the radium persists. I am now of the opinion that the normal radioactivity of the human body should not be increased. To do so is dangerous. So his hypothesis was sort of wrong, I guess you could say. Yes, the mesothorium did decay, but the radium still persisted in it. And the radium itself was causing those long-term issues, like the sarcomas and such.
Yeah, it's like... Are they making a clear connection between radioactive material and tumor growth, like causing cancer? Have they made that connection yet?
Some may have, some doctors independently may have, but at this point they were still using radium to treat cancer.
Right.
So it may have caused cancer again later, or a different kind of cancer later, but they're just working with what they know at this point.
Totally. Crawling in the dark.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is a song.
It is.
Hoobastank?
Thanks, Hoobastank.
Yeah.
Good to see you, early 2000s.
Oh, man. Anyway. So Quinta McDonald had been admitted in September of 1929, and as hard as she was fighting, she was slowly losing. It didn't help that her good-for-nothing husband had treated her very poorly over the previous years. While Quinta had invested her money so that her children would be taken care of long after her death, her husband had been going to speakeasies with his money. And when she refused to give him more money, from her own account, he hit her, literally hit his crippled wife, and threatened to kill her. So she started divorce proceedings.
This is why they choose the bear, fellas.
Yeah. So she started divorce proceedings, but they ended up reconciling. So
Oh, I'm sure it was amicable.
Yeah, no judgment, but I'd have made sure he couldn't swing another hand at anyone, personally. Quinta stayed in the hospital and fought hard, sometimes seeming perky and better than before. It was almost Christmas when she began having leg pains and swelling in her leg. She had hoped to be home for Christmas, but the swelling from her leg turned out to be a sarcoma. She died December 9th, 1929. This was the next phase, it seemed, of radium poisoning.
Mercy.
Another girl who had worked at the corporation during the war, named Marie Curie Laporte, showed up to the original girl's primary doctor, Dr. Humphreys, in pretty bad shape in the summer of 1930. She too had a sarcoma that had been rapidly growing and causing immense pain and dysfunction. She died June 16th, 1931. The sarcoma within her was reportedly the size of 2 footballs. It was huge.
Where was it? In her abdomen?
It was actually... It might have been part of it was in her abdomen, but it was also vaginal too.
Oh my gosh.
So like they couldn't even, they basically reported that to remove it would have meant like.
It would have killed her.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was rough.
I need to meet a hero.
So it might,
soon.
yeah.
It
might have like,
too much.
It might have extended to her abdomen, but because of how big it was. Like uterus and all that.
2 footballs? That's
big. Yeah.
You're in trouble.
So her husband, Vincent, would end up fighting the corporation in court for the next several years. But we'll come back to that.
The guy who took a swing at her?
No, this is a different lady.
Sorry. Okay.
This is Irene Curie Laporte.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry.
I know who you're thinking about, but yeah. You're thinking of Quinta McDonald's husband, who apparently was very much grieved when she died. And like, I think
I'm confused.
I think... Did he care about her? I think so, but I don't think he understood how to care about anybody. And he was just...
That's probably true.
He probably had a lot of mental issues and was just very unhealthy.
And people,
very toxic.
Yeah.
Toxic.
Women...
Sorry.
Women would get married during this time because it's just a social custom. Like if you're single too long or if you divorce, you could be destined to die poor and alone.
Right.
Because you are not married.
And I'm not excusing what he did at all.
Absolutely not. But there's a mountain of cultural peer pressure to get married. Yeah. Is the guy physically abusive? It happens.
But apparently, reportedly, he did grieve quite a bit. So I think,
maybe he grieved the fact that he was an a-hole to her.
Probably, yeah. I think he did care underneath somewhere, but he was a terrible person to her.
Yeah.
Now, Raymond Barry would go on to win a settlement for May Canfield early in 1930, but the only way he could get it was to sign a statement agreeing to never again connect himself with another case against or to assist.
I love it.
Or to assist with any cases, including by giving information or data against the U.S. Radium Corporation.
How is that legal? How can you... I don't know how any judge would uphold that order. Listen, we'll give you the payout. You just got to promise you'll never bring suit for the same thing that everybody else is doing and we know it.
Yeah, like you know too much and we don't like it.
That's right.
Basically. You can't even share information with anybody. All right.
I don't feel bad about taking a day off of work anymore.
They don't care about you.
So many terrible people running, keeping the gates in America. It's so bad.
Anyway. Now let's go back to Ottawa, Illinois, where in August of 1931, the executives and Mr. Reed fired Catherine Wolfe on account of her limping, causing the other girls to be nervous and to talk. Like they literally just were like...
Because of limping?
Yeah, like she was limping and the girls were talking. And so like the executives were like, we need to get rid of that girl because she's going to cause panic.
I love it.
So they had her walk into work that day, fired her, and were like, yeah, sorry, bye. She had worked there 6 days a week for 9 years.
Straight. And made them how much money?
Oh, there's no telling. I doubt she made as much as she should have herself. But
oh, yeah, of course.
Now, she did have some happy news. However, as she married Tom Donahue early the next year, and so became Catherine Wolfe Donahue. Now, more and more doctors were beginning to see the effects of radium in the workers. Thought, wow.
Words are hard. Don't worry.
Especially this time of day. More and more doctors were beginning to see the effects of radium in the workers, though they were not sure what it was at the time. Even if
plot twist, it's radium.
Yeah, even if Dr. Martland had written several articles. Wow, words are hard. At this point on the subject. Sadie Prey had developed a large black lump on her forehead before dying in December of 1931.
Oh my God.
Her death was listed as pneumonia. Okay.
Okay. Cool story, bro.
Ruth Thompson had also died, and her death was listed as tuberculosis.
Oh, okay. There it is.
You're waiting for that one.
Couple more paragraphs. We're going to need another tuberculosis case if you don't mind.
Yeah. Still, doctors would laugh at anyone suggesting that it was radium poisoning. This is after Sven Kier had been back to remind doctors of what symptoms to report back to him if seen. Catherine was still friends with her old co-workers, Marie Rossiter and Charlotte Purcell, and they often discussed each other's aches, pains, and disabilities together. So, like, he's the inspector guy, Sven, he's going to these doctors and being like, look, I need you to be on the lookout for such and such symptoms. If you see this, give me a ring.
Okay.
Basically, I'm just using today's lingo and
sure.
Whatever. Like, let me know.
Text me.
It's probably not even today's lingo. It's like, what, 90s lingo? And people are like, what are you, old? Yes, I kind of am. At least my 8-year-old thinks I am. So, anyway, Charlotte was having trouble holding things in her arms now, especially the left one that now had this small lump growing on it near the elbow. Not a good sign. Catherine was struggling with her legs as they had become so stiff she could no longer kneel at the church she always went to.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like a devout Catholic.
I thought you were about to say Catholic.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of kneeling, standing, and such. Yep.
So that was a big deal for her.
Wow.
Her husband decided to mortgage their house so she could get help from a doctor at this point, because like they just didn't have the money before, and they were just trying to make it.
How American.
The doctors were unsure what was causing her problems, though, and the bills were adding up quickly. The American dream.
Hey.
Medical debt everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Catherine was forced to stop working as she became anemic and her legs worsened. She was seeing a Dr. Charles Loeffler, who took a blood sample and noticed that it was abnormal. He started seeing Charlotte as well because of the lump near her elbow, and it had grown to the size of a golf ball at this point. Helen Monk, whose husband had left her because of her illness. There's a lot of awful husbands here. So was having worsening trouble with her legs and was no longer able to move around as much as she liked. Olive West Witt, she'd gotten married, so her last name is Witt now, described how she felt 75 basically when she was only 36. She just felt like she was,
of course,
much older than she was.
Yep.
Inez Vallet, who still had to keep a cloth to her seeping face, was now struggling to walk as her hips were becoming locked and immobile. The growth on Charlotte's elbow became terribly painful, and she went to Chicago to see another doctor who advised her that it should be amputated or she would not live. She did as he advised, and the arm was basically a medical mystery. So they kept it in formaldehyde for later study.
Well, that's actually clever.
Yeah, they took the whole arm off. There was no way they could put any kind of prosthetic or anything like that on. While its removal provided some relief, she still had phantom pains where the missing arm once was. That's actually quite common.
Yes, for any amputees, yes.
Yeah. Dr. Loeffler was still doing his own exams and tests on the girls, and his results came back as radium poisoning. Catherine and Charlotte actually went to confront Mr. Reed at Radium Dial after this confirmation, and he literally just looked at them with Catherine barely able to move and Charlotte missing an arm and said, I don't think anything is wrong with you.
I love it. Oh, boy.
Denial. Now, this is the guy, too, whose wife was eating spatula full of radium every so often.
how'd you like to come to a little get together on heaven?
Fish are friends, not fish.
Father looking for his son.
I never knew my father. Okay, sorry. I'm back.
Bruce the Shark.
I'm back.
If you know, you know.
Now, Dr. Loeffler had also attempted to talk with the company via their vice president, Rufus Fordyce. Go ahead.
Sorry. Say it, Rufus Fordyce. How many dice does he have?
4. I thought you were going to go with Fordyce's sermons.
I brought along Fordyce's sermons. They speak eloquently on all matters moral. But that's actually 4 dioceses, like the Archdiocese of Canterbury or something.
Well, it sounds similar then.
It's phonetically
Similar.
It's very similar. And I'm happy to oblige.
What is it? They call I only knew this from what is that other it's not Jane Austen. It's that story, it's a bit darker. Oh, what is it? It's one of the Brontes sisters.
Wuthering Heights?
No. I think it's one of the Brontes sisters.
Secret Garden?
No.
No, that's not a Bronte.
I'll say that they write that. It's the girl, you know, she's like this dude's like she's the oh my god, I'm tired. She watches the kid of this dude. He's got like his wife locked up in the attic. Doesn't tell her about it.
Jane Eyre.
Jane Eyre.
Yes.
Is that one of the Brontes?
Is it? I can't remember.
I can't remember either now.
Okay. You're gonna look it up as soon as we're
I
done,
am
though.
so tired. It is. It's 10 o'clock in the morning. It's 10 o'clock in the morning. And anyway, yeah, like I don't know where I was going with that.
Doesn't matter.
They call it St. John. Isn't it St. John?
Yes.
We say St. John, but they say St. John.
They run right over all the consonants in the 2 words.
It took me a long time to figure out they were saying St. John because I would see the subtitles.
It makes no sense.
And I was like, I thought his name was St. John.
Yeah.
And I always wondered why his name was St. John. I'm like, that seems a bit not.
Yeah, like this fire is singeing my eyebrows.
I don't know. Anyway.
That's what I thought it was too. And then you see the subtitle, you're like, what?
Yeah, so.
This is illegal.
Sorry, little ADHD rambling there. Now, so Dr. Loeffler also attempted to talk with the company via the vice president, Rufus Fordyce, in order to see about other possible cases. That's where we're at. It turns out that when the company said everything was fine, this was a flat out lie.
No way.
The tests they had done on some of the girls in 1928 showed that out of the 27 girls tested, oh wow, I can't read, showed that out of the 67 girls tested, 34 were either positively or suspected to be radioactive.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing all of this already, Mr. Fordyce refused to help in any way. Just flat out refused. No.
He don't want that smoke.
Yeah. So Dr. Loeffler then got into touch with an old friend of his who also happened to be the stenographer for Jay Cook, a lawyer up in Chicago. Jay Cook decided to represent the girls without cost, basically, which was great because at this point, the girls were broke from paying so many medical bills. It was only a few days after Catherine and Charlotte had confronted Mr. Reed that Mary Duffy, now Mary Robinson, died, and her death was listed as radium poisoning after some of her bones had been sent to another doctor in New York for testing. And part of me wants to think that doctor was the chemist from the Poisoner's Handbook, because they do mention bones being sent to them in that documentary.
Oh,
of a dial painter.
Okay.
And so I'm thinking that maybe that's that person.
It's quite possible. But they don't mention who this was in New York they sent the bones to.
I don't know. I'd have to look it up again.
Okay.
Or like watch it again.
You're probably right.
But I'm like, it's in New York, and that's where this guy was. So
yeah.
Anyway, Poisoner's Handbook. Good book, good documentary.
Mm-hmm.
Still, after all this, the company refused to offer compensation. Some local doctors refused to believe it was the radium, and many people in the town resented them. It was the Great Depression, after all, and taking on firms that were providing work was apparently offensive, even if that work was killing people, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people around town were like shunning them and were not happy with the girls for taking it on. So, back to New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
The girls, if you remember, were done playing games with these company doctors. And as such, those doctors, Ewing and Craver, told them they were going to scrutinize their expenses more carefully. As such, the girls were denied payments for medications that these particular doctors did not think necessary, and all of their home nursing care was ceased, which they pretty much relied on because they couldn't do much.
That is so sinister.
They were also informed that the business wasn't looking great financially, as people were not buying watches because, it's the Depression, and also because there was a more important case going on right now that was draining their finances. This would be the case of Eben Byers. Is it Eben or Eben?
I think it's Eben.
Eben Byers?
There's actually a...
Eben.
Yeah, I've heard
that makes sense.
Pronounced Eben, yeah.
Eben Byers. He was the famous rich industrialist, golfer, playboy dude who was drinking a lot of those radium waters every day.
Mm-hmm.
He had actually been prescribed radium water after a back injury. And then he just really got into them and he literally drank thousands of bottles over a few years' time.
Oh, dear.
This case, being as high profile as it was basically what defeated the company. It finally proved that radium was indeed a poison. Because
someone important died.
Yeah. Someone important, someone who had money, someone who was seen by a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it finally proved that radium was indeed a poison. And at the time, a lot of people had thought the girls were just trying to fraud the Radium Corporation, but apparently this guy was believable. So, because he's a guy and he's got money, I guess.
That's right.
So,
yes.
In 1931, Byers gave evidence to the Federal Trade Commission about the Radithor being the cause of his health problems. And the Trade Commission then gave a cease and desist order to Radithor.
Just like that,
right?
Huh?
Yeah.
Incredible.
And there was a headline, actually.
I love it.
A headline that read, "The radium water worked fine until his jaw came off." You can imagine all the girls being like, "Hello, we've been saying this for so long now."
Or perhaps they're just writing it.
Yeah.
Because their jaw is gone.
Also, well, yeah. Okay. I see what you did there.
Yep.
But also, they could still, I think some of them could actually still talk because they gave testimony.
It's fascinating. I can't even imagine.
I imagine too that it wasn't how they used to talk. So
no, of course not.
But sure, it did disable them in that way too.
Sure. Honestly, if they were able to still verbally communicate, wouldn't it be that much more powerful? You could clearly see how sick they had become. It would just be incredibly powerful.
And how little the corporation cared.
Of course.
So, Byers died March 30th, 1932. The Food and Drug Administration would finally go on to ban radium medicines, and the American Medical Association would finally remove radium from its list of remedies.
All right.
We're getting somewhere.
So as long as somebody famous dies, we can do something about things.
If you're poor, it doesn't matter.
Well, not you. You're poor.
Yeah, that literally, it's just this is history, and it just keeps happening.
Your jaw's fallen off, but no one cares. Why? Because you're a poor, though.
I love Shabazz so much. If y'all don't follow Shabazz on TikTok, you should. He's great.
Anyways, let me show you my wealth.
So, okay, the U.S. Radium Corporation was the only one supplying much of the materials now banned, and so the company basically went under. And in August of 1932, the plant that the girls had started dial painting in Orange, New Jersey, was destroyed. I have some sad news after this win, however. Catherine Schaub died February 18th, 1933, at the age of 30.
Yeah.
Grace Fryer would go on to develop a sarcoma in her leg. She died October 23rd, 1933. Edna Hussman would live a bit longer until she succumbed to a sarcoma of the femur on March 30th, 1939. And Albina Larice died at the age of 51 of a leg sarcoma on November 18th, 1946. So it seems like
they all die from cancer.
At some point, it catches up to them. Either way.
So terrible. I mean, those girls, the only support they had was each other.
Yeah.
And possibly their husbands too, of course, and their families.
The ones that stuck around, it didn't hit them.
Yeah, the ones that didn't try to, punch them in the face. And but I just knowing how sick they were or could become. I mean, it's it's not in existence.
Well, moving back to Ottawa,
mm-hmm.
Pearl Payne, who had only worked at Radium Dow for like a few months, I think she only worked like 8 to 13 months, was also dealing with symptoms of radium poisoning. She could no longer walk very well, and a tumor had been removed from her abdomen. Her head swelled to twice its size with discolored knots behind her ears, these large areas behind her ears. Those areas were drained, and some of the swelling did go down, but she suffered some facial paralysis afterwards.
Yeah, her cranial nerves were probably damaged.
Yeah. She was also having irregular vaginal bleeding, and a lot of it. One doctor kept telling her it was a miscarriage, though she bled for over 80 days. It was finally discovered that there were tumors in her uterus, and doctors advised her to get a hysterectomy to remove them all. She and her husband had wanted more children, so this was very difficult for her. She would go on to join the girls seeking lawyer Jay Cook's help in suing the company.
Mm-hmm.
And Cook honestly did his best, filing 2 separate claims for them in the normal courts and another in the Illinois Industrial Commission. Unfortunately, Radium Dow had some lawyers good at finding loopholes, and in 1935, the normal courts ruled against them. The exact ruling was this. Legislature failed to establish any standards by which compliance with the law could be measured.
The legislature.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Then change it,
Yeah,
anyway.
Exactly. But that reminds me of like the whole Chevron ruling. It has to do with a big component of that is ambiguity in legislative language, which tells me it could be exploited just that way again.
Yeah, and I would rather, I don't know why anyone else would want the lower courts instead of actual experts to give that information. Like, I want experts, like, telling me what's safe, what's not.
Yes.
So here we are. Okay. So Cook took it to the Supreme Court, but he lost there as well. And Jay Cook had to drop their case after this because he had done everything on his own expense, and it was just draining him financially. Now, another loss occurred in 1935 in New Jersey when Vincent LaPorte lost the case he'd been fighting for years now for his late wife, Irene. She's the one who had the sarcoma, the vaginal sarcoma.
Yeah.
The court basically said, yeah, this sucks, but because it was something that could not be foreseen by the company, it's not their fault, and therefore they're not responsible.
Yeah. This reminds me, you mentioned Jay Cook's he was financially exhausted from, so like today, it's a cliche that there are ambulance chasing personal injury lawyers, and many of them are multimillionaires because of the work that they've done. But that did not exist when Jay Cook was doing this, when Ray Berry was doing this. That was unheard of because it was, again, there's no legal precedent. And so even though it's an annoying cliche now and like midday TV is covered with ads for personal injury lawyers, like that actually serves as a layer of protection for the public from exploitative behavior.
Yeah.
Negligent behavior.
It's funny though, because like there's this one dude, he's been on TV. He's a lawyer. He's been on TV since I was a kid. And I saw an ad for him when Camilla was watching something. I was like, he's still there?
Still there, baby.
Yeah. But so, yeah, they found the company not at fault, even though radium's poisonous qualities had been written about prior to all of this. So I don't know how they could not have known, but whatever.
Written about in the media?
No, in reports of radium itself. So.
Oh, like government issued.
Well, I don't know. Well, science, journals and things like that.
Yeah.
So Back in Illinois, a law was being put into place that would include a provision for industrial poisoning, but it would not take effect until the next year. It was a result of the girl's case, but no legislation could be made retroactive, so it wouldn't really do anything for them.
Yeah.
On October 25th, 1936, Inez Vallet died at 29 years old of a hemorrhage of a sarcoma of the neck.
Mm-hmm.
When asked if her death was from her occupation, the doctors said no.
Oh, man. I've never wanted to punch a doctor so much.
I mean, I have, but I'm a nurse.
Okay. Well, yeah.
I've been there. Have I actually done it? No.
Wanted to.
Now, like the girls in New Jersey, the girls here would gain some help from the media, notably the Chicago Daily Times, making themselves very real to others in the form of interviews and pictures with their families. Many of the girls who had children were also worrying over their children in case, what had plagued them might pass on to them because they just don't know.
Yes.
Now, Catherine, Charlotte, and Marie found another lawyer named Jerome Rosenthal for their claim still sitting in the Industrial Commission. Also, the first woman to ever serve in a presidential cabinet, Frances Perkins, was now the Secretary of Labor. And they reached out to her, resulting in 3 federal departments to begin investigating. So, helps that she's a woman, I'm sure. Because it's like, no one wants to take these girls seriously.
Uh-huh.
Catherine's husband, Tom, also decided to confront Mr. Reed about those test results the company had kept hidden. But when he pushed for an answer, Mr. Reed literally started swinging at him. And Tom kicked his behind. Okay.
All right, Tom.
Tom is this like Irish kid, he is not really a kid, but
Tom Hardy?
No. He's got this, anyway, he kicked his butt. But even though Mr. Reed had started the fight, he had Tom arrested and charged with assault, battery, and disorderly conduct. Oh, and insanity. Okay.
I like that last one.
But nothing came of these charges because they were obviously just trumped up and it's just not, it wasn't going to go anywhere.
Okay.
Thankfully. Now, in December of 1936, Radium Dial just left town. They just left. They closed up shop, didn't tell anyone when they were going. And Mr. and Mrs. Reed went with them.
Not even the workers? Like
They just left.
Okay.
I think any of the workers, they just kind of ghosted. Left behind, that kind of thing.
I'm sure the company wasn't solvent at that point.
Well, we'll find out more in a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Luminous Processes was still a radium firm in the area. Luminous Processes had basically come out of Radium Dial, but they weren't exactly buddies. They were just like, we're going to start
competitors. Yeah.
So, so some thought they had just been outcompeted, I guess. As such, the case was now dropped by their new lawyer, Rosenthal, because now they're out of reach.
Wow. So just them moving locations. It's a legal move. Ooh, sorry. They're trying to outrun a lawsuit.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Catherine was growing worse and was now pulling parts of her jawbone out of her mouth as it just would come through the flesh. Marie Rossiter decided to pull everyone together. Charlotte, Catherine, the Glasinski sisters, who we talked about last time as well, Pearl, Olive, Helen, and Marie herself, along with Charlotte's, Catherine's, and Marie's husbands.
Mm-hmm.
Now, other former dial painters that were called up refused because they just didn't want to believe that they were poisoned at all. They just really kind of were going through this denial. We don't want to talk about it. We don't want to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever. The husbands wrote to a rather famous lawyer at that time. His name was Clarence Darrow.
Yeah.
I
know that name.
Mm-hmm. He was pushing 80 years old, however, and told them that he would refer the case to someone who could help because he did, sympathize with them and he wanted to help, but he was...
How do we know Darrow's name? He was involved in some sort of case.
Well, he was pretty famous. So.
Right.
The Chicago Daily Times also came through for them by finding where Radium Dial had run off to.
Heyo.
They located the business in New York, operating under the new president, William Ganley, and they were now hiring new girls to paint dials. Ganley came out to say that the girls' claims were invalid and completely dismissed the hidden test results issue. Peg Looney's autopsy as well. They dismissed all of that mess, but they did with her.
It's not true, believe me.
So the girls traveled to Chicago to meet attorney Leonard Grossman, likely recommended by Clarence Darrow. Catherine was now dealing with a lump that had grown on her hip. So it was a big kind of move for her. She had to manage getting to the big city.
Yeah.
Now, Leonard had played a part supporting the suffragettes. He was a man driven by principles instead of money, and he often worked for something as little as a client's shoes. He just was paid with shoes sometimes.
Okay.
Or something else inexpensive. The company's lawyers decided to go with the defense now that the paint was not poisonous and that the girls were not suffering from radium poisoning. This is interesting since these same lawyers said at Inez Vallet's hearing that radium was a poison, but that poison was not covered by the law. And they won that case. Okay. But now they're saying something different. Now, the big difference now was that poison was covered by new laws that could not help them retroactively, but were now put in place. Helping Grossman was his secretary, Carol Reiser, and his wife, Trudel Grossman, who was German. And I say that because Trudel would actually translate literature on radium, which had been written in German. So she was able to kind of translate a lot of those studies and things.
Oh, they're looking into it as well in Germany.
Oh, yeah, different places.
Interesting. Okay.
Well, the person who discovered radium, Marie Curie and her husband, they're Polish. So this is kind of a...
Right, that happened in Eastern Europe.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is kind of a thing that's been going on. We're talking about this in America right now, but yeah.
This is long, long before the digital age. The speed at which information travels is so much slower, which is why you can just pick up and move a company to a different state. And it's like, we don't know anything about any of that. And everybody's like, okay.
Yeah.
You can't Google the Radium Dial Company, Ottawa, Illinois.
Right. And you also have the laws and legislation it feels like it's really behind, because it just feels like a lot of these doctors and everybody else can get away with so much. Because when I read some of this, I was like, that doctor would get sued today.
100%. They lose their license, get sued, and have to start
breaking HIPAA over
picking
here,
up trash for a living. Just
invasive exams that they're not comfortable with.
Yeah.
No consent. Just all kinds of stuff going on.
Yep.
So,
and there's no federal protection of personal health information. HIPAA does not exist.
And the corporations are obviously allowed to be as corrupt as they want to be.
Yes.
So it's I feel like if you're a lawyer at this time and you're trying to work for these people, for these workers, no matter how much you put into it, you're a champion in your own way, because to even try is difficult. So Trudel would actually translate that literature for him. He asked the girls to get medical records, but the hospitals and doctors were hesitant to release those. So Grossman served notice on Radium Dial to get the records himself. Catherine became unable to handle stairs, and the lump on her hip just kept growing. Family members said that she would give off a glow just sitting there. And she had lost a lot of weight, so her bones, you could just see her. She was skin and bones.
Oh, my God.
They found 3 doctors that would agree to testify base their testimony on exams that they would handle. So Dr. Loeffler, who we've already mentioned, Dr. Delitzsch is actually a dentist, and Dr. Weiner. X-rays were taken of Catherine's bones. They also noted that she was malnourished now because she was just not eating, as it was painful to eat at this point. And she was only 71 pounds.
Oh, that's terribly underweight.
Yeah. They also took note of the destruction of her jaw and the pus basically seeping out from it now. And her blood work that they did showed a white blood cell count in the hundreds when it should have been around 8,000.
Yeah.
And the lump on her hip was now the size of a grapefruit. And so what they did was they just did a test trial for Catherine Donahue. So they focused on hers since she was kind of at the worst point right here. So they could see how things would go for everybody else. That makes sense. That was what
Yeah.
they all agreed on this. So the test trial for Catherine Donahue began February 10th, 1938. And later the other girls would have like their own kind of legal fights.
Hmm.
So the girls were there, including Catherine, of course, who had to be carried in, as well as the media. They were there. Now, the Radium Dial executive decided it wasn't important enough to attend, but only their lawyer was there. Also, in case you're wondering, the company had no insurance for this sort of thing because no one would back such a dangerous endeavor as the Radium Company at this point.
No.
So even the insurance company people were like,
they're hip to it already.
We don't really like that. Thank you.
That's great.
Also, the company was basically out of money, and anything that they could give out was out of reach of the Industrial Commission since the company had moved to New York. Still, the girls wanted to fight even if no money was ever seen, based on just the principle of the thing. Like, this is not okay.
Mm-hmm.
So the girls went about giving their testimonies, and Catherine even pulled out the box that she had been keeping some of the pieces of her jawbone in, just for visual reference. Of course, the company lawyer tried to shut them down with objections and such. The doctors themselves gave testimony about their exams and on radium in general.
How do you object to somebody having a box of their own jawbone?
Yeah. Look, they've gotten away with this way too much as part of it.
Oh, of course.
When the company lawyer tried to object to them, the doctors, the judge reminded him that they were skilled experts.
Oh, nice. Okay. Yeah. A judge appealing to clinical expertise.
Yes.
All right. Okay. I see you.
During Delitzsch's go, it's hard to say that with an S at the end, I'm sorry. Delitzsch's go on the stand, the dentist, Grossman asked him specifics about the girls' situations. He testified that they were not able to earn a livelihood, that this condition was permanent, and that this condition was fatal. Now, keep in mind, some of the girls are hearing that this is fatal for the first time.
Oh, wow.
Because apparently it was practiced back in the day to not mention that, especially to females, so that they wouldn't, be upset.
I cannot imagine. Okay.
There was no remedy, and Catherine Donahue likely only had months at best. Mm-hmm. Doctors Loeffler and Weiner said the same. The company lawyers still try to argue that radium might be abrasive, but it's not poisonous and could not be compensable. The trial, February 11th. Oh, I'm sorry. The trial continued February 11th, but this time it was at Catherine's bedside because she just couldn't get to.
She was homebound.
Yeah.
Wow.
And all of the girls continued to give evidence and testimony there. After this and much more objecting from the company lawyer, who called no witnesses or showed any evidence, by the way.
Objection. I don't like it.
The judge told them that they would have a verdict within a month.
Objection. Vibes are off with the witness.
Go ahead. Now, during this time, the girls, having already started changes around them concerning workers' rights, they had been influential in that way, decided to pull together to form a society of sorts.
Good for them.
They called themselves the Society of the Living Dead, which I love. I'm loving that.
That is so gangster.
I'm putting that on a coffee cup.
Please.
Society of the Living Dead. And it should glow. Like I should put it with
oh my God.
I'm going to use yeah.
Let us know in the comments if you want a coffee cup like that.
It's going to glow in the dark.
Yes.
So Grossman, their lawyer, announced its purpose to the press as to obtain better protection by legislation and otherwise for persons endangered by occupational diseases. On April 5th, the verdict was given in favor of Catherine Donahue. Yay.
Was she alive?
Yes.
Okay.
The company was found guilty, and she was awarded past medical expenses, back salary for the time she could not work, damages, and an annual life pension of $277, or what would be today $4,656.
Yeah, that's pennies. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. This was the maximum possible that the judge could give under the law.
Right. There's no legal precedent for like a $10 million settlement or judgment. Yeah.
Now, the only other lawsuit win I read about was Charlotte Purcell, whose trial came after Catherine's, and she was only awarded around $300, which would have been $5,000 in total
Oh, well.
today. The Glosinski sisters and Helen Monk did not carry through with their own cases. I think they just kind of lost wind there. Any money that Radium Dial had was pretty much gone now anyway.
Right. Their assets are, that's a real issue because now there's no compensation.
Yeah, and they didn't have insurance because no insurance would take it on.
No insurance agent worth their salt would get in that business.
Isn't that like a legal thing now? Like you have to have insurance for that kind of thing? Or is that
certainly
state by state? I don't know.
Yeah, it depends on the business. I've recently heard there's a mega church up in Canada that's a multi-site church. The founding pastor was accused of sexual assault, which in his case is clergy sexual abuse because there's a power gradient. He was arrested. There were multiple counts. As the first accusation happened, it was just dominoes were falling.
Oh dear.
And recently, this has been like 2 years ago, this actually came out. Recently, they had to choose to not meet in their facilities, no ministries whatsoever. They could not meet because their insurance had not been renewed. Their abuse insurance had not been renewed. So apparently they were not able to satisfy this insurance company with their policies and procedures well enough to say, if anything else happens, it will not go undone or unnoticed or unaddressed. So,
well,
yes.
I mean, if you need a bigger red flag.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, Radium Dial tried to appeal the ruling in Catherine's case, but it was eventually thrown out and they had to honor their end. They were like literally trying to do all these appeals. Catherine Donahue did die on July 27th, 1938. That was a day after the company tried to file another appeal. She weighed less than 60 pounds when she died.
Man.
An inquest was held as to the cause of death, where it was found that she had died of radium poisoning, and that had been absorbed while working at the Radium Dial company, which is a big deal because all these people kept saying, no, it's not related to her work. Meanwhile, Radium Dial filed more appeals, even going to the Supreme Court, where Leonard Grossman fought back on his own expense and won, ending the matter completely.
Nice.
I'm going to give some end notes here. Okay. It was around this time that World War II was breaking out in Europe. Some of this was going on. And there was now another demand for luminous-faced watches. However, because of what had been learned from the previous dial painters, new safety measures were put into place. The information gathered from the cases of the girls also helped with the understanding of how dangerous other radioactive substances were, such as plutonium, which was coming in as the Manhattan Project was going strong. Plutonium is actually biomedically similar to radium. So it's kind of a big deal.
Right.
Then there was the nuclear arms race, in which tests with radioactive bombs were being done, creating a fallout of radioactive particles, including strontium-90. New Jersey and Ottawa, Illinois would later become sites of medical research involving the dead and still living dial painters who had been exposed to radium. This research started the Center for Human Radiobiology in the Argonne National Laboratory. And in 1963, President Kennedy signed the International Limited Test Ban Treaty, prohibiting atomic tests above ground, underwater, and in outer space.
Wow.
The site of the plant in Orange, New Jersey, the one they tore down, was found to have levels of radioactivity 20 times higher than the safe limit by the EPA in 1979.
In 79?
Yeah.
Holy cow.
There was also contamination where the company had dumped waste, and nearly 750 homes had been built on top of this. The EPA actually ordered the successors of the U.S. Radium Corporation to clean it up, but they said no and instead promised to build a fence, like a security fence, which the EPA would actually finish. They didn't even finish it. So, in 1991, the New Jersey Supreme Court found the U.S. Radium Corporation forever liable for the contamination, and residents of that area sued the corporation, which led to a settlement of about, the successors of the corporation, which led to a settlement of about 14.2 million. At that point, would be about 24 million today in damages.
I love it.
It has cost the government $144 million. Today would be about $209 million to clean up this contamination.
Yes. Fun fact, which I know you love these. The chemical manufacturing company that my dad started working for at 19 years old, he left when he was 63, 62. He was there for 42 years. I can't do the math because numbers are difficult. The plant closed. It has since been completely dismantled. And they had an opportunity to sell the plant to an international corporation. They had a buyer come to the table that would have kept it from closing, which would have kept my dad from having to find a job in his 60s, which is not easy, I'll have you know. The main sticking point of their negotiations, which eventually failed, was the cost of the cleanup of the site. Because when my dad started there, when he was 19 years old, this is the late 70s, they would dump, just for example, they would dump benzene on the ground all the time. Benzene is carcinogenic, just so you guys know. How my dad did not get sick, I'm so thankful he never did. But they, again, this is the late 70s, nobody cares. Okay. And the main sticking point that eventually killed the negotiations was the $100 million cleanup of that site. It would require replacing all of the dirt on this site 30 feet down. They would have to dig it up, haul it away, and then replace all of it.
I'll be interested to see if there's any lawsuits in the future for that company. If somebody comes up with some sort of
great point.
Cancer.
I'll have to loop back around with my dad and say, hey, did anybody get sick?
Well, I mean, it does take a while sometimes.
Sure.
So Radium Dial actually went under back in 1943. After a while, a meat packing plant company opened there, and the employees started getting cancer.
Oh, Lord. Oh, no.
Also, one person who bought meat there reported that all of their brothers ended up with colon cancer within 6 months of each other.
Okay.
So that doesn't seem, good. This building was torn down in 1968. However, they deposited waste from the torn down building around town, including near a school field.
Cool. Love
and studies have shown that there's an above average cancer rate in that area, as well as seeing wildlife with tumors and a lot of pets dying young because of
we'll just make it more sad.
Environmental awful.
Thanks a lot, Becca.
I'm sorry.
Jesus.
We shouldn't mess with this stuff.
No. I'm just going to go lock myself in a Faraday cage.
You should do that. Why would you just take it's still radioactive even if you knock it down. Anyway. Okay. So the operation put forth by the EPA to clean the site of the Radium Dial Company was still ongoing in 2015.
Holy crap, bro.
Yeah.
It's still being cleaned up.
Mm-hmm. The dial painters' cases also led to the development of OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Administration.
You don't say.
If you work in certain areas, you know what OSHA is.
Yes.
Now, businesses have to tell workers if they are working with dangerous substances, and there is also training provided for the safe handling of work materials. Mm-hmm. Also, companies cannot hide tests done if they are even allowed to do them. Mm-hmm. As for the other girls, Charlotte Purcell lived to be 82, but was limited as she only had the one arm. Like amputating that arm is probably what saved her, though. And she had to use a back brace due to the crushing of her spine over time. Oh. So she was disabled.
Yeah.
But Marie Rossiter eventually had to have one leg amputated as it had turned black and swollen. She needed a metal rod in her other leg from the knee to her ankle and obviously became unable to walk. She died in 1993, and her body was donated to science for study. Pearl Payne lived on to be 98.
Yo.
As for how it affected their children, though, I only read about Catherine Wolfe Donahue's daughter and son. Mm-hmm. Her son, Tommy, died of Hodgkin's disease in 1963 at 30 years old.
Yeah.
And her daughter, Mary Jane, had a lot of health issues in life and ultimately died in 1990 of heart failure when she was 50. Mm-hmm. They did exhume Peg Looney for study and found that this is the girl that they were like, yeah, she died from diphtheria.
Sure.
We don't want to, you can't see her. So they exhumed her and found that she had 19,500 microcuries of radium in her bones. She had not died of diphtheria, as the company doctor had said, but of radium poisoning.
Did you say Micro Curies?
Mhm.
It's named after Marie Curie.
Yeah, we've been over this.
I love it so much.
Yeah. So, as for the other plant in Illinois, Luminous Processes, those workers suffered similar fates of bone loss and changes, jaw problems, losing all their teeth, anemia, and other disabilities. And a lot of these dial painters too, who didn't even seek to fight what was going on with them, like they ended up dying of different cancers and all kinds of stuff that
there's going to be scores of other people who never actually got involved in the legal challenge
that still died of the radium poisoning, even if it was misdiagnosed. Those who lived long enough were afflicted by cancers of different kinds, as I said, like sarcomas, breast cancer, leukemia, etc. Radium is just one of the industrial poisons used in our world's history, but I doubt it will be the last. And so long as corporate greed is more important than the lives of others, history can easily repeat itself.
Thanks, America.
Yeah. Well, it's not just America that does it, but...
Well, of course. It's probably worse everywhere else, but you know.
Now, Marie Curie, one of the discoveries of polonium and radium, along with her husband, she actually died in 1934 of aplastic anemia caused by the exposure to radioactive substances. She was literally not making any red blood cells anymore because of all the exposure she had been around. So, but yeah, that's the story of radium and the Radium Girls.
Oh man.
And here we are.
Well, I just want to say that was incredible. Like the research that you've put together for this 3-part series has been really, really incredible. So bravo to you. And I hope you're proud of your work.
I enjoyed it. I enjoyed doing it.
Yes.
For sure.
So that's going to do it for this episode, y'all. Thank you so much for listening. Be sure to follow the podcast on whatever platform you're listening on. Leave a 5-star review if you can. That helps push the podcast further into the algorithm to find other interested listeners like yourself. And if you like, you can consider being a monthly supporter on Spotify. And we're also, like we've said, brainstorming about another layer of content for Spotify subscribers or maybe a Patreon. We'll see. Give us some feedback, what you guys think about that. And we will see y'all in the next episode.
Bye.
Bye-bye.